are again. It's been my joy over the last 25 to 30 years to worship with you many times, most often down over here to my left near the front with my Uncle George and Aunt Jean, or other times to have the privilege of being here in the chancel to share and worship with you. But it's always a joy. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Nye. I've had the privilege of being here before. I call myself a Lutheran by flavor, so it's always fun to have an opportunity to share in United Methodist tradition and in other traditions, and I always look forward to visiting with you. A brief personal note for those of you or any of you who happen to know my Aunt Jean. She isn't able to worship very often, but she will be here for the second service today. So if anyone would like to, you're certainly encouraged to just hang around, have some coffee, and say hello. I'm sure that would mean a lot to her. Well, as I say, it's always a joy to be here. Your friendliness, your dedication to ministry, and your warmth are always very impressive. And speaking of warmth, wow, how about last week? I don't know where you were, but where I was, it was downright uncomfortable. Temperatures 88, 90, 95, high humidity. I remember one evening getting ready to leave my office for another meeting, and as I opened the door to go outside, it was like getting slammed with a wave of heat. I just wanted to go back inside with the hope that it would go away before I had to leave. The kind of heat that we had last week kind of slows many of us down. We start looking sometimes for a way just to sort of manage the day and get beyond it. Now, Carol, I know you said you weren't complaining about the heat after the crazy winter we had. But it was an impressive week with that heat. And it kind of leaves us low energy. The kind of heat where you might be looking for a cold drink, a few ice cubes, maybe sitting down in front of the television or the computer, surf the internet, play a few electronic games, or maybe if you're really fortunate, just catch a good nap. Some way, anyway, to escape that heat, because you just feel low energy when you're confronted by that. As compared to that low energy kind of feeling that I'm describing, in today's scripture lesson from the Gospel of Matthew that Linda just read for us, Jesus tells his disciples and us who are gathered here today in Tunkhannock that he did not come to make life low energy. He did not come to make life kick back and take it easy, what I'm calling a nap kind of existence. In fact, he indicates that as a result of him and God's will, our lives can and often will be the exact opposite of that low energy, kick back, faith components. I want to highlight two verses that Linda read to us. Verse 34 from Matthew, Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace. I have come to bring the sword." The sword. And in verse 38, he says, "Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me." Wow. As I studied those verses in preparation for today, I admit that I was a little bit uncomfortable. I don't like Jesus talking about I didn't come to bring peace. He's supposed to be the Prince of Peace and make me feel good. And he says, in this case, In this lesson, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring the sword. And then it gets even muddier or murkier when he says, anyone who does not pick up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. These were some pretty uncomfortable verses for me to try to absorb and think about. And yet I'm convinced within those verses and within this text, there is some great guidance for us today, this very morning, and in the mornings to come, and some very, very good news. Now, each of us personally who's gathered here today will have to think about what kind of action we are being called to. Because when we think about a sword, when we think about carrying a cross, we're talking about action, aren't we? We're not talking about pulling down the covers and taking a nap. We're talking about getting out there and acting and doing. And that will mean, how do we faithfully respond at work and at home and at school? How do we faithfully respond in the parking lot, in the car, in various places that we find ourselves? Jesus makes clear to us when he uses the images of a sword and of carrying a cross that this is a call to action. And I think he makes that clear because he knows that while we have good intentions, while we have admirable goals, and while we do have sincere faithfulness and faith in our hearts, we do and we rejoice in that, there are also times when our faith can take a nap. When there are circumstances, situations, conversations, and relationships that our faith might step forward in, and which unfortunately sometimes we find ourselves sleeping. Jesus talks about bringing a sword, an instrument of confrontation and conflict, because being faithful, standing for his will in today's world, can cause conflict and suffering and confrontation. It certainly causes action. Think about family life. Can there not be pain and struggle for parents who seek to stand on their faith when they're challenged by their kids? Challenged by what TV shows they're going to watch? By how much time they're going to stand and just be in front of electronic screens? By how many things they're going to fill up on their schedule? Perhaps by what kind of vocabulary they're going to use because of what they hear at school? It's painful and challenging to stand up to those cute, sweet, loving kids that we care so much about, and to say, no, that's not right. That would not be where our faith and Jesus' example would take us. Can it not be hurtful, like the cut of a sword, when we have serious disagreements with our spouses or our family members, and we're basing those disagreements on what we believe is a faithful thing to do, standing firm that yes, we have to pray before our meals? Oh, but nobody, yes, we need to pray before every meal to give thanks to God. Standing firm about forgiving that person whom we love but who has been unkind for us in a momentary or particular action or attitude. And it is hard to be forgiving. It is painful to feel their action sometimes. But we are called to stand firm and to take the action of faith. Can it not be difficult within a marriage or a family relationship to hold the line sometimes on expenses and what we would like to do with our funds, or how much we want to give to the church, or how much we're putting aside for education? It can be hard. Faith is not an easy way of life. And sometimes it feels like a confrontation. Sometimes it feels like we're picking up that cross and carrying it ourselves when we try to be faithful, because in the world that we live in, it's not easy to be faithful. In situations with our parents or our kids or our co-workers, for people of any age, at any stage of life, whether it's in the office or in the food store, at the gas station, or home alone, there are decisions that we're making in situations. And sometimes it's just easier not to stand firm or to move forward in action for Christ, but to take the easier, more popular, more self-serving way. How about this situation? And this is, I confess, this is sort of a personal peeve of mine, and I'm not putting down technology, but have you ever heard or noticed the kinds of conversation that go on the internet, or on tweeting and twittering and Facebooking and emailing? And oh, the kinds of conversations and attitudes that are projected out there. Oh my goodness, he's a real geek. You wouldn't believe. Oh, she's a jerk. Da, 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 da. Oh my goodness, there's a party at the Joneses tonight. I'll bring the booze, you bring the girls. On and on and on go the electronic kinds of things. And it's not all bad. I'm not putting down the media, but I'm questioning how often it is misused. And I'm wondering how Jesus would use that media, or how Jesus would respond to the way that we as a society use that media. Again, please do not let it be said that Paul and I said media and internet and technology are bad. They aren't. But I am questioning some of the ways that we use it. And I'm questioning with this perspective. How would Jesus feel about that? Or what action would Jesus want us to take in response to some of those messages? There are so many areas of potential arguments and contention if we are to stand for Jesus' values and Jesus' will. And in today's message, the gospel, he acknowledges that by saying, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring the sword, because I know that my values are not always going to be the values that are popular with society. And brothers and sisters in Christ, I think sometimes we worry much too much about what our kids, what our friends, what our co-workers, what society will think of us, and much too little about what God is thinking about us. I admit, the kids are there, the family's there, the co-workers are there, the personal desires are there. But Jesus reminds us today that the bottom line decision-making action is best made when it's based on what God would have us do, and not on convenience or fear of confrontation or the reality that we're going to hurt some feelings and cause some problems. A little boy in Sunday school understood this. His name was Tommy. Now, I have to confess, I don't know that Tommy was a student in Tunkhannock United Methodist Church's Sunday school. But Tommy was a student in Sunday school, and one Sunday the teacher asked the question, "Is there anything that God can't do?" And of course the teacher was waiting for the class to all say, "No, of course not." But Tommy put up his hand. And so, not really being sure what to expect, the teacher said, "Okay, Tommy, tell us all, exactly what can't God do?" And Tommy said, "Well, he can't please everybody. He can't please everybody. Because all of us are not willing all of the time, and that's just part of our creation, to put God first." But Tommy had his finger on something when he recognized that putting God first means sometimes putting ourselves, our families, our friends, and others we're in relationship with second, and that is going to sometimes be tough. It's sometimes just going to be painful. As if we had to pick up a sword and make our point. Or as if we had to carry the cross on our own shoulders to make sure that the message got to the right place and came from the right place. You see, living faithfully is not a laid-back, easygoing, nap kind of experience for Christians. Anyone who says being a Christian is easy is nuts. I mean, truly nuts. Because we fly under God's banner, not under the convenience or the self-centering banner. And there's nothing low energy or laid back about that. Earlier this morning I said this text probably has some good guidance. Well, the guidance is that we have a measuring rod, that we have a way to determine what's faithful, and that we can see that we're called to action, Jesus action. The good news for us is that Jesus did exactly that. He picked up his cross and carried it and suffered on it and died on it. For Anna Marie and Carol and Shane and Linda and Paul and Bob and each of us who are in this room. Is that not incredible news? That God's only beloved Son would die for us to give us an example of faith and forgiveness when we don't live up to it, when our faith is napping, when our faith falls short. Out of divine and perfect love for us and for our salvation, Jesus hungered and thirsted and accepted criticism and was made a fool or mocked by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the priests. He was accosted by the beggars and the prostitutes and the infirmed. He was betrayed by his very friends, and in the end was willing to pick up his cross and carry it through Jerusalem for us. For us who are gathered here today. We are reminded not only that Christ tells us it's time for action, that being a follower of his is not a laid-back, take it easy, always be popular existence, but time for action in faith. And that wherever we are, whether it's in Tunkhannock or Clark Summit or Springtown or Factoryville or Mahoopany or wherever we happen to find ourselves, Jesus has given us the example. And Jesus is there with us. And we don't have to wonder, can I do it? Because he already did. What we have to ask is there action here in my life for Jesus Christ, wherever we are? Today we're reminded that faith is not for sissies. Faith is not for the faint-hearted or the lazy, no matter how hot the temperature happens to be outside on a particular season or day. And it's not a peaceful existence in a world that we acknowledge is filled with sin. But what is exciting and redeeming and hopeful for us is that the faith that Jesus lived, he passed on to us, and the blessing and victory that Jesus won, he passes on to us. And at the times that we might fall short, at the times when our faith might fall asleep, Jesus is there offering forgiveness and new life, not just in eternity, but in June 2014, in our lives, offering us the gift of faith-filled action. In just a moment, we're going to sing together the hymn, I have decided to follow Jesus. Let that be our prayer. Let that be our wish for each and every one of us united in Jesus Christ. That through faithful action, we would move forward